We are thrilled to have David Erickson here. He is a man that met us in 2012, I think. We were renovating this building, and this is one of my favorite stories that I tell people, is that I get a phone call, it's in the middle of the winter, and it's David, and I didn't know him at the time. And he said, "Hi, it's David Erickson." It meant nothing to me, but he said, are you still working on that building? And those of you that know how many years we took on the building, I was like, yeah, of course we're still working on the building. So he said, I'm crumpling up this paper, and it has an article about your organization, but you know how it is when you crumple up paper for your fire? It's like 3 months old, right? Yeah. So he was like, right, do you remember that? So he's like, is it, 3 months later? I said, of course. He says, I have lusted after that building for 35 years. So,
always been in love with this building.
Yeah.
And one of the little subtopics of my talk here today is how I market this stuff and how I sell this stuff. And I'm not a Madison Avenue marketing genius by any means. I've been a door knocker and I just put my foot in the door.
He calls me up. He says, can I see the building, right?
Yeah.
And then I said, sure, because I was giving tours all the time. And he walks in and he said, you need a pot-bellied stove.
And it turned out to be,
the rest is history.
Yeah, it's the entire heating system.
Yeah, it is, the entire heating system.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yes, so here we go.
So, good afternoon, and thank you for coming out on such a beautiful Sunday afternoon. I almost didn't show up because I came on my motorcycle and I wanted to just keep going. But anyway, I'm here, and I'm David Erickson from Littleton, and I've been in the antique stove business now, it's hard to believe, for almost 42 years. It's been my sole occupation. Prior to that, I was a industrial arts teacher. I was trained at Fitchburg State Teachers College, and I was a woodworking teacher. And in 1976, I was out riding bicycles. I was a young skinny guy back in those days, and used to ride with some friends of mine, and we were doing a 100-mile ride out around Harvard, and we came across this beautiful old depot in Littleton. And right on the corner above the roof of that car was a little sign that said, "For sale by owner." Now, this was on a Sunday, and Bob Wallace had put the sign out on Saturday. And I said to my friends, wow, look at that great old building. And I took the number down, and I called him on Monday, and in about a week we had made an agreement, and I bought the depot. Not to go into the stove business. I was teaching woodworking at Perkins, the School for the Deaf and Blind in Watertown. This was 1976. And I saw the building as a place to live upstairs. Former owner lived upstairs, and he had a little business downstairs. And I had always wanted to open my own school of woodworking, high-end woodworking, adult ed, for people who'd like to learn how to make a highboy or something like that. And I was going to teach with my professor from Fitchburg State Teachers College, Walter Harrod. And I bought the building, we moved in, it had electric heat. I said, oh my God, how am I going to heat this place? So I went to the Want Advertiser, and I bought a $50 parlor stove, not unlike that one over there. Back in the 70s, you could buy them for $50. And I brought it to school, I fixed it up. And when it was all done and up on the workbench, just like that one was, the music teacher came down, her name was Helmy Salo, and Helmy said, oh my God, what a beautiful stove. Can you find me one of those? Because I was bringing that one home to heat the upstairs of the building where I was going to live. So I went and found another one out of the Want Advertiser, fixed it up, sold it to Helmy. Maybe I made $100 or $150, but back in 1976 I was only making about $7,600 teaching school. So that was, that was a whopping profit. So that was my first customer, and a while after that, I was still teaching and just fiddling with stoves on the side. A woman walked in my shop one day. Her name was Edie Clark. And she said, I've heard that you have some old Glenwood stoves. She said, I've always loved Glenwoods. And I'd like you, to sell me a little Glenwood power stove. I said, yep, I have one. And I did. And then she came back a while later and said, David, I'd love you to fix me a Glenwood cook stove. I did. Well, Edie Clark was a writer, a freelance writer at the time for Yankee Magazine, later to become the editor of Yankee Magazine. And in 1980, Edie Clark wrote an article about David Erickson in the Christmas December issue, and it was a 3-page right in the centerfold. And it launched my stove career. I quit teaching shortly after that, and I've never looked back. So how I got into this business wasn't exactly a planned thing, but here I am. I'm still at it and still loving going to work every single day. My first employee was my father. Hard to talk about my father. I love my father. He worked in the post office for 35 years. He retired on his 55th birthday because he hated his job. And he was young, and he had a good government pension. My dad worked for me for 7 years. He never took a penny. He used to love coming to work. He drove up from Shrewsbury 4 days a week. My current employee has been with me for almost 33 years. His name is Keith. I call him my rock star employee for 2 reasons. Number one, he's a magician with the work he does for me. And on the side, he's a rock star. He has a great band, and he does very, very well. So we can change to the next. So anyway, that was my shop. An old picture of my shop. I've entitled this exhibit "Artistry in Iron" to kind of pay tribute to the people that worked in this industry back in the 1840s through the 1920s. They were really, really amazingly talented, artistic people. It was hard, dirty work, but yet the product they produced, as you can see from what's in this room, is really amazing. The process would start with actually a plaster mold, maybe not unlike the way they design a car today. The first thing they'll do is make a wooden mock-up or a plaster mock-up, just to, the basic size and lineup of it. And then once the company agreed that, that's the model we want to make for 1854, very talented pattern makers would carve each and every part of that stove in wood, usually of fine grain mahogany, so that all that detail had to be exact, had to be really smooth. But of course the wood pattern was delicate, and it couldn't be used on a daily basis on the foundry floor. So they then converted it to an iron pattern, which was also very polished and very smooth. And then each one of those parts of that stove, 4 legs, the finial on the top, all the sides, each one is a separate part and had to be molded in a sand, a flask, like a sand box. And the molder would set the pattern in there and ram the sand, flip it over, ram the other side, and then remove the pattern, and then the molten iron would be poured in. I think if we go to the next frame, these are some of the molders in the foundry, and those are the flasks that are on the floor. To make a stove part, that's like this big, you had to have a flask that was bigger, and of course it had to be filled with the special molding sand and compacted or rammed, so that those things were really, really heavy. So these guys were, they were pretty tough. Again, really dirty. The sand was black. Foundries, and if I took you up to the Nashua foundry, where I still get parts cast today, the inside of the foundry looks just like that. Nothing has changed in the process in 100 years. It's amazing. Next one. There's another picture of some guys, their molds, probably getting ready for the pour. I think the next one might be the pour. Go ahead. Yeah, here's where they've removed the metal flask or the jacket because it's no longer needed to contain the sand. And then the furnace has just been blown off, and they'll fill the crucibles, pouring crucibles, and you can see the white hot iron where it's been poured into each one of the molds. So every part had to be made one at a time. There was no high production. And it's pretty much still done the same way today. Let's try the next one. Yeah, here's a couple of guys pouring, again, white hot iron. Iron melts somewhere around 2,450 degrees. And these guys aren't wearing any, today with OSHA and everything, men have to wear special pants and shoes and everything so that they don't get the molten spatter and burn themselves. So that's how this stuff kind of came to be. Let's see what the next one is. Oh, I just love this. These are all the people of a foundry sitting on a big pile of the flasks that were kept outside. A lot of these foundries, these pictures are all from Peekskill Historical Society. I have a friend who's the head of the Peekskill Society. So most of these pictures were probably taken in Albany or Troy foundries. Albany and Troy, New York were the kind of the birthplace of the American stove industry. They started in the early 1840s. And if you look at a business registry from that era, you wouldn't believe how many stove manufacturers there were in Albany and Troy, New York. And a lot of the early fancy stoves, that Abraham Lincoln stove, the column stove behind this young gentleman, they're all Albany or Troy manufacturers. This is just some of the really specialized tools that the molders would use to make sure that the sand mold was perfectly smooth, and they would use the little hook tools to be able to lift the iron pattern gently out of the sand without it disturbing the impression in the sand. And back in 1840s, even though those guys are all dirty and blah, 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 it was a very, very, very respectable job to be a molder in a foundry because you were considered to be a highly skilled technician. And I read in an account once that when the molders left work at the end of the day and walked home, they would like to put their little brass molding spoon in their back pocket as a kind of a badge of their, their good job. And what it reminded me of is where my shop is in Littleton. For many, many years, they're all gone now, but at the other end of Taylor Street were 4 big digital plants. And during lunchtime, all the digital people would come and walk down the street to go to the store across the street at lunch or whatever. But all the digits all wore their little lanyard, their digital badge, their badge of honor and courage, Well, the molder did the same thing with his little brass spoon. Okay. So, next part of it is, where do I find all this stuff? People say, where the hell do you get these things? Well, I get them in some pretty unusual places. This is one of the more fun ones by a long shot. This is Clapboard Island. It's a 30-acre private island off the coast of Falmouth, Maine. It's a mile off the coast of Falmouth. It only has one house on it. Next picture. This house was built in the 1890s by the vice president of the Pennsylvania Railroad. It was his summer cottage. I think it had like 13 bedrooms and about 8 bathrooms. And I was contacted by a gentleman who had just bought this island a couple of years back, and there was an old stove in the barn that he wanted to sell, and there was another stove in a little caretaker's cottage that he wanted me to restore and then bring back. So let's see what the next one is. So in order to get out to Clapboard Island, this isn't a really great picture, but the owner of the island had his own, it's like an LST, a World War II landing craft. It's a beautifully built aluminum flatbed craft with 300 horse outboard motors, and the front, he can drive it right up on the beach and drop the gate, and he could drive a small excavator or whatever and bring lumber and everything back and forth. So in order to get the stove off the island, we had to take it completely apart. There's a big pile of the rusted parts right there, and put them on this special LST. Next picture. And I had to take everything down this really steep ramp. You know, the ramp for the float goes up and down with the tide, and I picked the wrong time to go get the stove. It was low tide. So I really, this was the very bottom or base of the stove that I didn't take apart. I thought I could move it in one piece. Next picture. Yeah, and that was when I finally, if it got away from me at the bottom of the ramp, both me and the base of the stove would have been down in the drink there, but I made it. Next picture. So yeah, there we are bringing the base. See how I say we, you know, because I don't really have any help. Nobody wants to hang around with a stove man, because this is what you end up doing all day. But we brought it onto the boat. Next. And then Neil brought me across to the town landing in Falmouth, and we dropped the gate, and I unloaded all the parts on the shore and then put them all in my truck and took it home. Next. That's the stove all done, that rusty pile of parts. This was a really, really special stove. It's a center firebox double oven cook stove. It was huge. It was a hotel range. It's called a Spears hotel range. Stoves built not only for hotels and restaurants, but also for the really well-heeled people with really big homes. And it is now the star of the show in Boardwalk Empire. No, not Boardwalk Empire.
Gilded, or no?
The Gilded Age.
Is that the right? Is that the name of it? They did the program on HBO right now.
Yeah, this is in. I sold this to the production company of Gilded Age. I got confused there because I had other movie stuff too. But yeah, that's what came off of Clapboard Island. That was a great project. This is another really fun project. This is Fuller Hall. It's in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, and it's absolutely untouched community hall, huh? Just like this place. It had a stage at one end and a big stove at the other end, and the interior was completely untouched. And I was able to buy from the owner the original stove that's been in that building since 1896, next picture, which was a round oak parlor heater with an extension can on the top of it. That whole upper section is what makes it very, very rare. They were for heating buildings with high ceilings, much the same as the potbelly that heats this building has an extension can on it too. So it was missing lots and lots of parts, but the main, bulk of it was there. So next picture, and we took it out and off and into the truck. Next picture. Took it, I found another stove, the same model, but without the upper can on it. So between the two, I was able to mix and match and come up with one complete perfect stove. So these are all the parts that would have been on their way to go to the sandblaster. And there they are, next picture, yeah. There they are after the sandblasting process, which gets the metal really nice and clean and allows us to make any repairs before we reseal it and re-cement it. Next. And that's it, all done. And I found parts for this stove all around the country. I happen to have had the original finial, the piece on the top with the Indian's face on it. but some parts came from a guy in Portland, Oregon, some other parts came from a guy in Colorado. But that's a beautiful round oak 20-inch with a double can, still set up for burning wood. This was a cook stove that I sold to a wonderful couple. It's a Glenwood. They're from Waterbury, Connecticut. And they had a really beat up old cook stove that they'd had probably 50, 60 years. And they came to me, said, we want to buy a new kitchen range. And they said, we want the best. Well, what do you mean? You know, we want the best. Well, the Glenwood Home Grand is like the Lincoln Town Car, the El Dorado of stoves. So they picked out that Glenwood Home Grand. They were both in their late 80s. And they came up and bought a brand new cook stove. And they still have it. They still check in with me from time to time. So it's some of my wonderful customers. This is that Glenwood Home Grand. That's the stove that you just saw. That, again, part of my talk about the process of what we do, how we take them completely apart and sandblast them. Next picture. Sandblast, they're all nice and clean. Next. And there's my right-hand man, Keith, reassembling and resealing all of the seams to make it, tight and right back to the same condition it was in the day it left the Glenwood factory in about 1905, 1908. Next. This is a family heirloom project that's actually also highlighted on this poster. You may want to look at it after the talk. This is a family from Texas, and this was the husband's grandfather's stove, a really rare one. I'd never seen this model before. It's called a Jewel. This is, of course, jumped ahead here, already taken apart. Maybe the next one. Yep, again, more pictures of the same kind of mess that we inherited. And then after the cleaning process, and there's Keith putting it all together. He's made a brand new steel jacket for the back. We have our own sheet metal fabricating shop, so we make all those parts new. And then that's the stove all done. It was missing one part. It was missing the arm on the finial on the very top, the trophy-looking thing on the top. See how it only has one on the left. And so we had finished the stove, but the guy that does my delicate brass castings is slower than death. So I didn't want to tie up the job, so we sent the stove back to the customer, and then about 6 months later they mailed me that little piece, and I had it duplicated, so it's now all complete. But and that's where it went. The owner of the house is very eclectic. It's a big, beautiful sea captain's mansion right on the ocean in Portland, Maine. But some of the stuff that she's done inside is really not anything like a 1860s house. It's kind of crazy, but everybody's kind of cool still. Next, and this is the house. It's amazing. It's in South Portland, and that house was in Skowhegan, Maine, 90 miles away. And these people bought that house in Skowhegan, and they didn't take it apart board by board. They cut it into quadrants, into pieces, and moved that house 90 miles from Skowhegan to this oceanfront lot and put it back together again in a new foundation. I mean, I can't even imagine how much. And there's a view of the ocean and the sunset from the front porch. Yeah, so I get to go to some pretty cool houses, in my little trade here. Again, in my comment before about I'm not a marketing genius, I never really had a website. I still really don't have one that's very functional. I've sold my product for 40 years at, this happens to be Brimfield, the big outdoor antique flea market. And I've been bringing stoves there for about 36 or 37 years, 3 times a year. There's on the left there is, I look at that very quickly and right away my eye goes to that Franklin with the brass gallery on it. That's a very early 1820s, maybe 1830, very, very early Franklin that you just never, those are museum quality stoves nowadays. The things, they belong in the Metropolitan Museum. But next frame, and that's another Brimfield stove, Brimfield exhibit with a pretty eclectic porcelain, the deep cobalt blue on one side and the fire engine red 1953 chambers on the other side. I guess it wasn't very color coordinated in those days. But then on, another Brimfield. The green and cream one is it's a 6-burner, the green and cream. I do a lot of gas ranges as well. I mean, everything in this exhibit is early, wood burning stuff, but the bulk of my business is really vintage gas stoves. Those 2 Glenwoods in the back row, the gray, the pearl gray Glenwood 4-burner, and then the green and cream 1926. That's a 6-burner double oven, top of the line Glenwood. And there in the front is an Ivy Franklin with the Ben Franklin portrait tile. There's one of those in the back of the room if you haven't noticed it yet. Go on. And there's that Franklin with the heat. That's called a Wilson heat dome on the top. It's not just an ornament. The stovepipe connects in the back of the stove and goes out and up, however. But the urn on the top is a hollow cast iron receptacle that's open to the fire so that the heat from the fire would not, before it went out the chimney, went up into that dome, and it just was more surface area, more heat radiation, called the Wilson heat dome, all decorated with brass finials or what have you. Yeah, that stove went out to Deerfield, Mass. Next. And then, this is another place I exhibit and do extremely well at. New Hampshire Preservation Alliance's Old House Restoration Fair, Old House and Barn Show. If you're an old house owner, it's a great show. It's like a home show, but there are no hot tubs. It's only products and services for people who restore old homes. And there's also one in Portland, Maine, put on by the Portland Landmarks Association, which is Portland's historical commission. And they put on an every other year old house fair there as well. Great shows. Moving on. And this is the Maine Boat Home and Harbor Show in Rockland, Maine. In the same place where they have the Lobster Festival and the Blues Festival, they also have a home and boat show. And people say, what the hell are you doing at a boat show with stoves? And I say, I go to any show where I think there's people that have money. and I do very well at that show too. So that's an outdoor show. So it's a little, when you get rain at a show like this, it's kind of scary. I've had a river flowing through my booth. So this is this place in Berlin that I fixed the stove for once. I put this together for a talk I did in Harvard, and I forgot that these are in there. But obviously, 19 Carter, the most magnificent restoration of anywhere around. Next. And the Red Cloud potbelly that we did.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's a railroad station potbelly from, I think it's dated 1918. Funny, 1918, the pandemic year. Well, and it's got the extension can on top, again, an option in the day for helping heat rooms with very high ceilings. Next. And I have a terrible fear of height. I can't even go up a two-step step ladder. So I was instrumental in procuring all the stovepipe for the chimney installation, but I didn't help. I only put the stove in place. Next. And it's heated. What makes it such a success here in this building, and that we never really expected it, but it really did it. It's been repurposed and converted to that's a 90,000 BTU gas burner. So it's quite a powerful burner. In the back of the stove is an automatic thermostatic control and a safety pilot. And it does a great job of heating this room. And reasonably economic. I don't pay the gas bill here, but I think it does all right. Anyway. This is another one of my repurposing things. You know, in order to stay in this business with ever-changing regulations, the EPA is just making it harder and harder and harder to sell solid fuel burning stoves now because of emissions regulations. For many years, antique stoves enjoyed a grandfathering clause that anything manufactured prior to 1977 was exempt. They took that away in 2020, so now it's getting harder to sell anything that's wood burning. And this was not a wood burning stove. I got off on a tangent. But this is another repurposing. Really unique stove, 1924, 1925, hot point, double oven, 6-burner electric stove. If you had an electric stove in 1926, you were so far ahead of the cutting edge. You know, I mean, electric was just coming in. And to have a 6-burner double oven, which of course was high capacity, really amazing. Well, it had 6 round electric burners in that area and all those switches and knobs to operate everything. But they were, you know, all archaic. The wiring was all no good and blah, blah. So what we did was we restored the whole thing. It's quite a tall, that stove's taller than me. It's quite an amazing piece. But that's we cut out the cooktop, and that's a smooth induction electric cooktop. You know, the newest, the Buck Rogers ray gun of cooktops now. They say it boils water faster than a gas stove. So it's now got 6 burners, induction, and both ovens are still electric. That stove's over in Lunenburg. This is just a catalog, an old catalog picture of what's about to come. It's a perfect range. It was on the right side of the stove was wood burning. It had the solid lids, and the firebox was in the middle section where you'd put the wood. And then the left side was gas for summertime use. You had winter and summer all in one. 4 gas burners on top and a little gas oven below. And then up above there was a gas broiler and then a sliding warmer. Well, next frame will show you that's what I started with. I had that in the cellar of my barn for probably 25 years before I decided to do something with it. It came originally in gray porcelain. You know, that was an optional finish in the day in the mid-20s. The porcelain was all stained. We couldn't save it. So next frame, we removed all the porcelain by sandblasting, which takes a long time, and had all the nickel plating redone, put it all back together. But the woman that bought it, it went to Portland, Oregon, a woman with a big, beautiful Victorian house, designed her whole kitchen around it, but she didn't want anything to do with wood burning. So next picture might show, oh, well, it's just another angle. It still has its original gas burners on the left, all the valves, everything still works as it did when it was new. Next picture. The gas broiler up above, really powerful thing. You could sear a tuna steak under that before you can blink. But what we did was to make it a little, besides the 4 gas burners on the left, we put a 2,000 watt electric element underneath the lids so that she's also able to cook. You wouldn't try to boil a spaghetti pot over there, you'd do it on the gas. But this is another warming area where you could saute things or simmer things and keep things. So it turned a 4-burner stove into a 6-burner stove. And then we changed all the ovens, now all brand new stainless steel interiors. We changed them all to electric. Fully insulated stainless interior electric oven. And I think the next picture, no, jumps on. Anyway, just to back up for a minute, we were talking about price increases of all kinds of things. The price of a sheet of stainless steel in the last couple of months has absolutely gone insane, almost ×3 from what I used to pay for it. I mean, this is totally not on my script, but the high temperature paint that we paint these stoves with is made by Dampney Paint Company in Everett, Mass. They're the gold standard of high temperature finishes. The paint's always been $36, $37, $39 a gallon. I buy it in a 5-gallon pail. I went in last week and I bought 2 5-gallon pails, 10 gallons, $720. It went from $39 to $72 or $74 in one jump. I don't know what to do. Nickel plating, nickel is supposed to, the precious metal market, nickel just went through the roof a week or so ago. So it's only a matter of time before that trickles down to my, the next time my nickel plating guy goes to buy the little nickel, beadlets that he puts in the tank, that's gonna go crazy. Next. This was a great project. A former Massachusetts governor's mansion in Dedham, Mass. You can go to the next picture just for a second to show. That's the house. Westwood, not Dedham, next town. But this was Governor something from the 1860s or 80s, I guess, was his home, purchased by a surgeon in Boston, and he did just a rock star restoration on this entire house. Now we can back up to the brick set again. Go backwards one, yeah. So these were the cook stoves of the really wealthy. Instead of being a freestanding, Glenwood or whatever, like the stoves we're so used to seeing, these stoves were built right into the brick wall. And it was quite a, it was quite a masonry undertaking to build one in. This one's a Walker and Pratt made in Boston. The other company was Cyrus Carpenter. They were also in Boston. But the firebox ran laterally across the front, had a big long firebox, and the heat went up that central chimney, and then the 2 ovens, the heat would go around both of the oven boxes, then up through the sliding warming ovens, and then up and out the chimney. So they're a lot of work. Like most of the time we don't take them out of the brick because you have to demolish the brick to get them out. So in the case of this one, which had about 10 coats of white paint on it when we started, we built a tent and we sandblasted it right in place. But anyway, I've done a lot of those brick sets. I did one for a great project, Christopher Kimball, the America's Test Kitchen on public television. We found one of these brick sets in the St. Botolph Club on Commonwealth Avenue. It's a private, wealthy person's club. And it was the biggest one I've ever seen. It was a number 7. And Christopher would belong to the club and somehow convinced the club to sell him the stove. And so he hired us to go in, jackhammer it, take it out, restore it. Needed a lot of work. And then we reinstalled it into his home on Worcester Court in the South End in Boston. Beautiful, opulent townhouse. And he did a 1-hour PBS special, and you can still find this. It's called Fanny's Last Supper, and it's a 1-hour show on Chris Kimball and all of his other chefs cooking like an 8-course Victorian meal on this big wood-burning monster. and it's like 120 degrees in the kitchen, and all its chefs are sweating, and they're grilling salmon, and they're doing, it's a great, great show, really. You know, give you an idea of what a kitchen was really like in 1890 to cook a meal on one of these things. Fanny's Last Supper. Anyway, this is a gold medal Glenwood combination range that that's in the oldest house in Harvard, Mass. It's Carla Perlstein restored that house, and she bought this stove along with many, many others from me. And it's the everyday stove. It has gas burners on the side, electric oven up top, a gas broiler up top, and the firebox, instead of burning wood, has a gas heater in the firebox, just like this potbelly here. So it's the main heat source for the whole first floor of the house. That was Glenwood's absolute top of the line in the day, called the Gold Medal Glenwood. My friend Bruce, right here in the front row, has something very similar in his house. And, some of the, I've worked for some pretty famous people. This was Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. When I brought that stove to install into his house, I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement that I would never tell anybody I had been there, and I would never take any pictures. But I did it anyway. Because I thought it was really cool to be in Steven Tyler's house. It was just a really nice, 1890s round coal-burning parlor heater that we converted to gas, just like the one in the back here. That's my kitchen, one of my kitchens. That's another one of those double oven center firebox ranges. It's called the McGee Double Oven Kitchener. I had that in my house for 20 some odd years. My kids grew up in front of it. We cooked all our holiday meals in it, and it heated a very big family room. And then next picture, I think that, yeah. Then I got a call one day from the Longyear Museum, which is the museum that takes care of all the Mary Baker Eddy properties in Boston. Mary Baker Eddy was the founder of the Christian Science Church. And this is an old picture from the Mary Baker Eddy mansion in Newton, which is a real stone mansion. It's a fabulous house. And they were restoring it, and they said, we have this old picture of the kitchen, and we're looking for this stove. And I said, well, I've been in business at that point up to about 35 years, and I've only ever seen one, and it's in my kitchen, and it's not for sale. Well, they kept hammering on me, and finally I sold mine. And it's now that stove that was in the last picture is now in that exact same spot, the way it was. The pipe is all the same. The little gas stove, see, she had a big wood burning cook stove here, and then to the left she had a gas stove for summertime cooking. And that stove was down in the basement. So I took that stove and I also restored that, and it's all, the kitchen today looks just like this picture. I've been taking care of the potbelly stove in McSorley's Ale House. McSorley's is the oldest bar room in New York City. This place is infamous. They only serve one thing, and you can't get a gin and tonic in McSorley's or a bottle of Budweiser. They have McSorley's Light, McSorley's Dark. That's all they sell. And when you order one, you don't get one, you get two. It comes 2 mugs to an order. And nothing has changed in this bar in 100 or more years. They didn't allow women in there until like 1970. And there's pictures on the wall of presidents who've been there, and but anyway, next picture. That's an old photo. That's the stove that's still there. I've restored that stove 2 times from McSorley's because they still burn coal. They heat the whole bar with coal. And they work the damn thing really hard. It's always breaking, so I'm always going down there and either fixing it or bringing it back and fixing it and bringing it back again. The guy with the guitar is Woody Guthrie. Yeah, and that's probably from the 30s. And where's Evie? Evie, we were talking about the copper pot on top of the barbershop water heater. The copper steel light that's on top of the stove. They used to use those in old, bar rooms, barber shops, on and on, as a way to heat water. And in the front, there's a big brass spigot where you could fill up a pot with hot water. Next picture. Yeah, so there's another picture of McSorley's. There's the stove. The pipe runs across the entire bar to the chimney on the other side. And you see the ceiling fan and the lighting fixture and the taps and everything. Next picture. Oh, no, they're not in order. So there it is after the last time I restored it with that copper jug. But all of those pictures on the wall are all like from famous people, presidents, and just amazing. Have been in this place. Yeah, I guess so. I thought I had another picture of McSorley's today with modern people standing at the bar, and it's exactly the same. The fan is still there, the lighting fixture is still there. Nothing's changed. It's an amazing place. This is a Whirly 100. It was made by Sears Roebuck, 1905. It's up to the top of the finial. It's probably this high. And it's a coal-burning stove. Illuminator means it has mica windows all the way around, so not only was it a coal heating stove, it was also an illuminator. It had those polished reflectors up between the lion's faces, and it would actually kind of shoot a little light out into the room. That's now owned by one of my very best customers of all time, Sam Rouse, who owned Very Fine Juice Company. He loves stoves. He loves stoves as much as I love stoves. And he still burns coal, just like I still burn coal at my house. Next. This is one of my most recent sales. It went to the Barking Crab in downtown Boston. They always heated the place with a wood stove, but it was a real kind of a chunky stove. And Keith and I put this Andes in there, and they really love it. It does a great job. I think that's the last. One more picture, maybe. Oh, I gotta slip. That's Lucas, my 8-month grandson. I gotta give him a plug. Yeah, I was going to mention just a couple more things. I know we mentioned the Gilded Age. I did a lot of stoves as well as other props. That's another little part of my business because of the trickle-down movie business that's at Fort Devens now, and also down in Weymouth at the shipyard in Quincy. There are a lot of movie production companies around looking to rent or buy, period pieces for props. And so when they shot the second or third rendition of Little Women in Harvard and Concord, I rented them a whole bunch of stoves and some other great stuff. I had a couple of stoves in Boardwalk Empire, and then Mildred Pierce. I did with Kate Winslet was in Mildred Pierce, and I did a big, beautiful kitchen range and a couple of sinks and all. So yeah, I thank the movie business, because that's how I'm still hanging on. Thank you all for coming.